Perhaps you've never considered how seemingly insignificant grains and powders could drastically alter the course of world history. Yet, it was spices, like pepper, cloves, and cinnamon, that played a pivotal role in the great geographical discoveries and devastating conflicts of the past. Greetings, adventure seekers and history enthusiasts! Welcome to our channel, where we explore the remarkable stories that have shaped our world. Today, we delve into the captivating and sometimes brutal saga of the war for pepper. Imagine, in medieval Europe, a handful of pepper was as valuable as gold. Spices were more than just flavor enhancers. They symbolized status, were believed to cure illnesses, and even served as a form of currency. They elevated kings and fueled deadly wars between nations. Prepare to discover how the intense desire for spices ignited the age of exploration, leading to the discovery of new continents, the establishment of transoceanic trade routes, and the emergence of colonialism, whose impact is still felt today. This is a story filled with dramatic twists, heroic endeavors, and tragic crimes, a tale of how ordinary kitchen ingredients became instruments of geopolitical power, causing immense suffering. But why were spices so crucial to medieval Europe? The answer extends beyond mere culinary desires. In those times, spices held far greater significance than simple seasonings. Firstly, they were essential in cuisine. With limited food preservation techniques in the Middle Ages, meat often spoiled, and spices effectively masked unpleasant odors and tastes. Furthermore, spices elevated dishes, adding variety and sophistication, particularly important for the aristocracy. Secondly, spices were integral to medicine, believed to possess healing properties. For instance, pepper was thought to combat the plague, and cloves were used for toothaches. Spices were also used in the creation of perfumes and aromatic blends. Pepper held a distinguished position among spices. Beyond being a popular seasoning, it was a status symbol, affordable only to the wealthiest. Pepper also served as a remedy against the plague, a recurring and devastating disease in Europe. Moreover, it functioned as a form of currency for transactions. The economic value of spices was immense, often compared to gold due to their high cost. The spice trade generated enormous wealth, enriching merchants and entire city-states. The spice trade was monopolized by Muslim merchants who transported spices from Asia to the Mediterranean. Italian city-states like Venice and Genoa acted as key intermediaries, controlling the distribution of spices across Europe. This allowed them to accumulate vast fortunes and exert significant political influence. Consequently, the high demand for spices and the monopoly on their supply spurred Europeans to seek alternative routes to the spice sources. While Italian city-states profited immensely, they couldn't meet the growing demand from the rest of Europe. This created a strong incentive for other European powers to find their own, more profitable path to the Spice Islands, the Moluccas in Asia. A significant catalyst for these intensified searches was the closure of traditional overland routes to Asia following the fall of Constantinople in 1453. The Ottoman Empire, which captured the city, imposed its own trade regulations, making overland routes less appealing to Europeans. This situation propelled maritime exploration to the forefront. Portugal pioneered the exploration of sea routes to Asia. Portuguese navigators embarked on expeditions along the west coast of Africa, aiming to circumnavigate the continent to reach the Indian Ocean. Key figures in this era include Bartolomeu Dias, who in 1488 became the first European to round the Cape of Good Hope, opening a sea route to the Indian Ocean, and Vasco da Gama, who in 1498 successfully reached India, establishing a maritime route and initiating a new era in the spice trade. Portugal's success inspired other European powers and ignited the colonial race. Countries like Spain, the Netherlands, England, and France also sought to claim their share of the lucrative spice trade. Notably, Christopher Columbus pursued an alternative route, Believing the Earth to be smaller than commonly thought, he aimed to reach India by sailing west across the Atlantic Ocean. This endeavor led to the discovery of America, though Columbus himself remained convinced he had reached the eastern shores of Asia. Thus, the European quest for spices became a powerful driving force behind geographical discoveries. The search for new sea routes not only expanded the known world, but also initiated globalization, with profound and lasting consequences for humanity. The discovery of sea routes to Asia marked the beginning of a new chapter in the struggle for control over the spice trade. A spice fever gripped European powers, each vying for a share of the profits. This competition often involved military conflicts, political maneuvering, and brutal colonization. In this intense rivalry, the interests of numerous European powers clashed. Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, England, and France, all seeking to displace competitors and dominate the most valuable spice sources. Portugal, having pioneered the sea route to India, initially held a significant advantage, establishing key trading posts along the coasts of Africa, India, and Southeast Asia, thereby controlling vital maritime routes. However, other European powers gradually challenged Portugal's dominance. Spain, for instance, also sought access to the Spice Islands, dispatching Magellan's expedition, which, despite its tragic end for Magellan, allowed Spain to gain control over some territories in Southeast Asia. The Netherlands played a pivotal role in this struggle. With a strong navy and a well-developed trading system, the Dutch rapidly ousted the Portuguese from many key positions. The conquest of Malacca, 1641, and the Moluccas, Spice Islands, were significant milestones in Dutch expansion. The Dutch East India Company, VOC, became an emblem of this era. This early transnational corporation controlled vast territories and trade flows, maintained its own army and navy, and effectively pursued an independent policy. Tragically, the methods employed by Europeans to secure control over the spice trade were often exceptionally brutal. The Banda Massacre in 1621, where the Dutch nearly exterminated the population of the Banda Islands to establish a nutmeg monopoly, stands as one of the darkest chapters in this history. Spice politics also became intertwined with piracy. Pirates attacked merchant ships, looting spice cargoes. Often supported or even commissioned by certain states, pirates transformed maritime trade routes into zones of constant conflict. The struggle for control over the spice trade had far-reaching economic and political consequences. Unfortunately, the cost of spices was often measured in blood, slavery, and genocide. European colonizers, driven by profit maximization, resorted to severe exploitation of local populations. Indigenous people were forcibly employed in the cultivation and harvesting of spices under inhumane conditions. Their lands were confiscated, and traditional ways of life were destroyed. To establish monopolies over specific spices, Europeans did not hesitate to commit mass atrocities. The Banda Massacre serves as a stark example. The Dutch not only killed a significant portion of the island's population, but also devastated their economy, forcing the cultivation of nutmeg exclusively. The spice trade was also deeply connected to the slave trade. Spices were frequently used to purchase slaves in Africa, who were then transported to plantations in the Americas. This triangular trade generated immense profits for European merchants, but inflicted unimaginable suffering on millions. Numerous eyewitness accounts and chronicles bear witness to the cruelty and violence that characterized the spice trade, serving as grim reminders of the dark aspects of human history and the immense price many populations paid for Europeans' access to exotic spices. It is crucial to remember that behind every pinch of pepper and every stick of cinnamon lies not only a tale of discovery and adventure, but also one of suffering and injustice. The war for spices triggered profound shifts in the global balance of power. Economic and political centers shifted from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. Italian city-states, once dominant in trade with Asia, gradually lost their influence, while countries along the Atlantic coast, Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, England, and France, gained prominence. The spice era was a period of intense capitalist development. To finance long and perilous maritime expeditions, joint stock companies were established, with the Dutch East India Company, VOC, being a prime example. These companies not only conducted trade, but also wielded significant political authority, often acting as states within states. The spice trade also facilitated the formation of vast colonial empires. European powers seized territories in Asia, Africa, and the Americas to control raw material sources and markets. These empires were built upon the exploitation of local populations and the extraction of resources. Simultaneously, the rise of some states was accompanied by the decline of others. For instance, Portugal, despite pioneering the sea route to India, eventually lost many of its colonies to stronger competitors. Spain, despite amassing vast wealth from the Americas, also failed to sustain its empire in the long run. Thus, spices played a critical role in reshaping the world's political map, influencing the rise and fall of nations, the formation of new economic systems, and the creation of colonial empires that shaped human development for centuries. The spice era, spanning several centuries, eventually drew to a close. The decline of the spice monopoly was driven by several factors. Firstly, the increase in trade volumes led to the devaluation of spices. As spices arrived in Europe in larger quantities, their prices decreased. What was once a luxury gradually became a more accessible commodity. Secondly, the expansion of plantations worldwide played a significant role. Europeans began cultivating spices in their colonies, reducing their reliance on traditional Asian suppliers. For example, pepper was grown not only in India, but also in South America and Africa. Thirdly, the advent of the industrial age shifted priorities in global trade. With industrial development, other goods like coal, iron, and textiles gained prominence. Spices lost their former significance, although they remained an important part of international trade. Symbolically, pepper, once the most prized spice, became the most common. It is now found on nearly every table, yet few consider the price paid for its accessibility, a price measured in centuries of violence, colonial wars, and exploitation. The spice era left an indelible mark on human history, not only transforming European cuisine, but also influencing the world's political map, economic development, and social structures. Though the spice era has ended, its legacy continues to shape the modern world, impacting various aspects of life, from cuisine to culture and politics. In cuisine, the influence of spices is undeniable. They enrich the flavor profiles of many national cuisines, making food more diverse and refined, becoming an integral part of culinary traditions worldwide. In culture, spices also played a significant role, appearing in literature and used in folk medicine and rituals. They became symbols of exoticism, wealth, and luxury, influencing fashion, art, and other cultural expressions. In politics, the consequences of the war for spices are still evident. The streets of London, the ports of Amsterdam, colonial laws all bear witness to that era. It was during this time that the foundations of the global economic system were laid, a system in which some nations dominate while others remain dependent. The role of spices in shaping the global world and its inequalities is undeniable. The modern perception of spices has fundamentally changed. From luxury items, they have become everyday products accessible to all. However, it is important to remember that this accessibility comes with a complex and often tragic history. A history of how the pursuit of taste and wealth transformed the world, leaving a lasting impact. In conclusion, it can be stated with certainty that spices were a true catalyst for globalization. They not only broadened European horizons, compelling them to seek new routes and discover new lands, but also fundamentally altered the structure of the global economy and political system. The desire for spices led to the establishment of intercontinental trade links, advancements in navigation and cartography, and became a major driver of colonial expansion. Spices became symbols of wealth, power, and cultural exchange. influencing cuisine, art, and various aspects of life. At the same time, it is crucial to remember that the story of spices is not solely one of discovery and adventure. It is also a narrative of violence, exploitation, and injustice. Many populations paid a terrible price for Europeans to enjoy exotic spices. Today, when we use pepper, cinnamon, or cloves in our dishes, it is worth pausing to reflect on the immense blood and effort expended to make these ordinary items accessible to us. The history of spices serves as a reminder of the complexity and contradictions of human history, where great achievements often coexist with tragedy and suffering. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot to us.